Welcome to this evening's meeting of the Westerville City Schools Board of Education. We are delighted to have all of you this evening. The agenda will be displayed on the screens in the front of the room for you to follow along. There will be two opportunities this evening to address the board, the first being agenda item 6.1. The first set of public comments is relative to agenda items 7.1 through 11.7. Please state the agenda items you are referencing at the beginning of your comments. The second opportunity is agenda item 12.1. There is a sign-up sheet located on the table in the back of the room, and each speaker will have 5 minutes to address the board. A timer will be shown on the screen. And with that, Ms. Marshall, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Bell?
Here.
Mrs. Altman is absent. Dr. Nestor Baker?
Here.
Mrs. Meyer? Here. Mrs. Davidson?
Here. Will you please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance? I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, we do not have any district highlights or recognitions, at least this evening, but we will this Saturday. No reports this evening, which takes us to board meeting minutes. May I have a motion to approve the minutes of the Board of Education meeting held on Monday, May 8th, 2023, as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Any questions or comments here? Hearing none?
Mr. Bell?
Yes.
Dr. Nestor Baker?
Yes.
Mrs. Meyer?
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson?
Yes. We do not have any public comments this evening, which takes us to financials. 7.1, the 5-year forecast. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
And we're going to turn it over to Ms. Marshall.
Thank you. I'm going to go up to the podium. I think it might be a little easier. All right, here we are again, 5-year forecast time. President Davidson, members of the board. So this is our spring update for May of 2023. We approved this back in November and submitted it to OD, so this is an update from the November forecast. Throughout my presentation, I've included some pictures. I wanted to highlight some of the great stuff that our students are doing, some really cool things. So I just have little blurbs I'm going to read as I go through this as well. So on our title page here, this is a Westerville North High School student playing with her younger peers at Hawthorne Elementary as part of the Big Warrior, Little Warrior mentoring program. I thought it was really cute. So looking at the purpose of the forecast, we use it as a long-range, for long-range planning. We also use it as the basis to sign the district's 412 certificate. So this is the Ohio Revised Code 5705-412, which allows us to have a certificate for revenue certified, and we are able to, we have to have that for any new salary or wage schedules, any appropriations resolutions, any contracts over $500,000, or any multi-year contracts. The forecast is also used by the Auditor State's Office and the Ohio Department of Education to see what a district's financial status is. And this picture is Genoa Middle School gifted language arts students playing with a variety of educational and strategy games as part of an activity to better understand the district's Portrait of a Graduate framework. Which way am I? Okay. The requirements of the forecast, we have to file a 5-year projection no later than November 30th each year with ODE, which we did in the fall, and then we update it in the spring no later than May 31st each year. The forecast includes projections for the current fiscal year and the next 4 fiscal years, and it also includes 3 years of history for reference. The forecast only includes the district's general operating fund. And I like to look at it made up of 3 separate sections. So we have the revenues, expenditures, and fund balance and reserves as one section. Our fiscal year runs July 1st through June 30th. And in this picture, we have a Westerville Central High School art student painting a portrait of an orphan in India as part of the Memory Project, which is a nonprofit organization that invites art teachers and their students to create portraits for youth around the world who have faced substantial challenges. Looking at challenges for the current forecast. So state funding, the state is currently in the process of updating its biennium budget for fiscal years 24 and 25. Why is this not working? Legislative changes are always a challenge. House Bill 126, as you know, had a large impact on the districts this past year. And this year, the 135th General Assembly is considering House Bill 1, which would raise property taxes for taxpayers and cause a large reduction in tax revenue for the district if it was passed as it was intended. Also, unfunded mandates from legislative changes could add unexpected expenditures. This is not working. Federal funding is also an unknown. We do have one-time ESSER funds that we've used to help offset the impact of the pandemic, and those funds will be expiring over the next 2 years, which will shift over $13 million back into the general fund. And we are looking at property values that can be unknown, where this year is a reappraisal year, a full reappraisal, and sometimes that can prompt the legislature to look at how property taxes work when they're looking at large increases in values. And just a reminder that projections are based on the best information we have available today and will most definitely change going forward. And this picture is Wilder Elementary second grade students dissecting a squid after wrapping up their language arts unit on the sea. So notable changes from November to the forecast. So interest rates have increased significantly over the past fiscal year. Previously, we were estimating collecting in the general operating account about $2.5 million in interest revenue. That's up to about $4.5 million now for the year. Staffing numbers have been aligned with updated staffing plans. And then budgets we set this spring for the next fiscal year 2024. So those numbers have been updated as well based on the budgets submitted. And the students here at Westerville South High School line up to sample Somalian food during the school's first ever cultural fair. Just a reminder of the ESSER funds. So we had ESSERs 1, 2, and 3. That was provided by the federal government as one-time funding to help with the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. These aren't accounted for in the general fund, but they're accounted for in a separate special revenue fund, Fund 507. But we have covered some expenses that were normally paid out of the general fund using these funds, which, as I mentioned earlier, will be coming back to the general fund over the next couple of years. And for this picture, a student in the medical detectives class at Walnut Springs Middle School tests for bacteria growth in a lab. I thought that was fitting for our COVID slide. Oh, too much. Is this me doing this or is somebody else doing this? It's all me? Okay. Just checking. It's not working. All right, sorry about that. So looking at all revenues, the most notable changes with revenues is we had our operating levy that began collections in calendar year 2021. The Fair School Funding Plan was implemented at 1/3 the total amount through the current biennium, which ends this fiscal year 23. We had the elimination of the Board of Revision settlements from House Bill 126, which reduced revenues by approximately $1.2 million going forward annually. The impact could be greater with the district no longer being able to appeal to the Board of Tax Revisions, some of the Board of Revision value disputes. So that could have a potential to be a deduction from our tax revenue as well. And as I mentioned earlier, interest rates have increased significantly over the last year, which is causing a bump in revenue for the current fiscal year. All revenues, fiscal year 22, actuals show 66% of our funding come from our local property taxes, 27% from the state, and 7% from other sources. Fiscal year 27 is projected to be 68% from local property taxes, and 26% from the state, and 6% from other sources. And this will heavily depend on what state funding looks like in the future. In this picture, members of Westerville South High School's STEAM Club experiment with fire during one of their meetings, which made me a little bit nervous when I saw this, I'm not gonna lie. There we go. Local property taxes. In total, all property taxes are estimated to be about 64% of the revenue in fiscal year 2023. Operating levy from 2019 began collections in 2021, as I mentioned earlier. This forecast also assumes a 22% increase in property values, and the collection rate is estimated to be at 99%. House Bill 920, just a reminder, does restrict growth in revenue for the district on all voted levies because of them lowering the effective millage on any voted levies as values increase. The district will see a small increase on any new construction or inside millage. Tangible personal property taxes, which are taxes on public utilities infrastructure, make up 2% of the property taxes and are expected to increase slightly. In this picture, a Heritage Middle School student in engineering class creates a slinky for the school's first ever Makers Expo. So state funding, looking at state funding, as I mentioned, we're in the current biennium budget process. So we receive state funding in unrestricted grants, restricted grants, and then property tax allocation is also state reimbursements and subject to the biennium budget process and the state legislature. So the current biennium is fiscal year 22-23, so we're in fiscal year 23 right now. What they're looking at is for 24-25, and then we have another biennium budget period in this forecast in 26 and 27. And we will update the November forecast to reflect the outcome of what the current state budget will look like. So they have, I'll talk a little bit about the timeline and all that on the next slide. If I can get there. Well, and let me mention the property tax allocations. Those are the reimbursements from the state for rollback and homestead exemption. And that is something that would go away under House Bill 1, the rollback would. Homestead exemption would be severely changed. And this forecast is assuming that we will continue that allocation throughout the forecast period. And then looking at the timeline of the state budget, so the current biennium budget is House Bill 33. Like I said, it covers 24 and 25. And the governor and the House released their version of the budget, and now it sits with the Senate. The Senate is expected to vote on the budget by June 15th, and then it will go to conference committee, and it has to be signed by the governor no later than June 30th. So we will see, hopefully that's done. There were a couple of biennium budgets ago. They did have to do a temporary measure to extend past June 30th, but let's hope that that doesn't happen this time. Whittier, the picture, Whittier Elementary fourth graders hide kindness rocks throughout uptown Westerville for any passerby to find and keep. It's part of a joint project with their classroom teachers and their art teacher. So something to go look for in uptown. So all other revenues include payments in lieu of taxes, which you call pilot revenues, Board of Revision settlements, interest revenue, tuition, student fees, and other miscellaneous receipts. Pilot revenues decrease as tax abatements roll off of the tax roll, and those values are added to the tax base. Interest rates decreased in 21 and 22, but have increased significantly well past pre-pandemic levels for the current fiscal year. House Bill 126, as I mentioned earlier, eliminated the Board of Revision settlements. We did have a rush to have all of the cases settled, so it eliminated anything from 22 going forward, and we had a deadline to have the cases settled for any previous ones, and so we had a rush of everybody coming in to settle, so we saw an influx in the current year in that revenue. All other financing revenue sources are generally one-time receipts and include things like Medicaid reimbursements, refund of prior year expenditures, and the district does expect to receive a $1 million E-rate reimbursement in fiscal year 24, which is why that's bumped up. So revenue uncertainty, state funding is always kind of a wild card, I'll say. So just looking at the last several years, and we did have the pandemic that we were dealing with, but we saw cuts in fiscal year 20 and 21. We saw a new funding formula in fiscal year 22 and 23 that's not been fully funded. It's only being funded at 1/3 in the current year. And then we are subject to the new biennium budgets going forward. Legislative changes, property values, property tax collections, and the economy all could have an impact on the district's financial situation going forward. Looking at overall expenditures, they are anticipated to increase annually as the cost of doing business increases. This forecast also includes opening Minerva France Elementary this school year, so fiscal year 2023, and then we are opening Minerva Park Middle School next school year, this fall coming up in fiscal year 2024. And then we also have the portions of ESSER funds that are used to offset the revenue losses and continue programs for our kiddos. Looking at expenditures, overall, the district's largest expense, we are a people business, right, is personnel. So that will set at 81%. Set at 81% for 2022. We project it to be about the same for 2027. And this picture, a student in Phil Carney's advanced 7th grade science class at Walnut Springs Middle School presents during Carney's in-class science fair. Just taking a little closer look at personnel expenditures. Again, approximately 81% of total expenditures. Fiscal years 23 through 25 are using estimates from the updated staffing plan. And then fiscal year 26 and 27 are based on average salaries. New staff in the current fiscal year include Minerva France Elementary School and a principal for Minerva Park Middle School. New staff projected for the opening of Minerva Park Middle School this fall for fiscal year 2024. And then this fiscal year 2023, we have a one-time 27th pay period in the year, which is just slightly inflated by $4.4 million in salaries. And then ESSER 1 provided for $2 million to the general fund, ESSER 2 provided for $6 million, and ESSER 3 provides for $16.9 million to be used over the period through 2024. And like I said, those expenditures will come back to the general fund in 2025. And in this picture, members of Robert Frost Elementary's Frost TV team review an interview of their upcoming broadcast. For all other expenditures, purchase services is really our largest expenditure line. It includes payments to other districts for tuition, for special needs, and other students, utilities, and other services. Materials and supplies includes textbooks, software licenses, consumable items that do not have long-term useful lives. Capital outlay includes equipment, technology, and other long-term items with long-term useful life. Other objects includes services purchased from the ESCCO, so that includes like our teaching substitutes and aides. And then operating transfers out include transfers to the Permanent Improvement Fund for turf replacement and to the Food Service Fund to carry negative balances that are estimated. Inflation is anticipated to remain high throughout the forecast period. And in this picture, Emerson Elementary's Student Equity Council, the Equity at Emerson Changemakers, decorate the building as part of the school's Start With Hello Week festivities. Looking at expenditures uncertainty, we always have staffing needs, the educational needs of students, the economy, inflation, healthcare costs, legislative mandates, and any continued effects of the pandemic could change the outcome of this forecast as well. So this is an overall look at the change in the unreserved fund balance. So the green line is our revenues projected actual. So we're showing 3 years of actual, 2021 and 22, and then projected through 27. The green line is revenue, the red line are expenditures, and then the blue line is the general fund's unreserved ending balance. We've talked about all of the notable changes for the current year. We are projecting an unreserved 29-day cash balance for 2027. As we think about any future levy plans, those will be dependent on what state budgets look like. And this forecast is assuming flat state funding going forward. That's all I have. Is that long? I'm sorry. Any questions from the board?
Tell us 3 things you want us to remember.
3 things I want you to remember. You mean not all of that? So I think advocacy for the Fair School Funding Plan to be updated with the fiscal year 2022 inputs. So the governor's budget only included continuing the phase-in of the Fair School Funding Plan with the fiscal year 2018 inputs. We need those updated to 2022 numbers in order to have a more accurate reflection of the cost to educate a student. Making sure that House Bill 1 does not make it anywhere through the legislative process. So that could be disastrous for lots of reasons, as we talked about. And just know that things will change. So those are the projections we have today. And going forward, there's lots of variables that go into creating the forecast, and it will definitely change going forward.
Okay. Anybody else?
I'm going to add a 4th thing that I want to remember, and I want people to remember the reality that the state only provides just slightly more than a quarter of our funding.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's extraordinarily important for this community to realize because it is not what most people understand.
Yes.
And it's continued to go down over the years. And given the current legislative climate, I rather expect that to continue. And I think as we look at the challenges, you mentioned a number of those, and the importance of keeping in the front of our minds and in everyone else's minds that these numbers in so many ways are dependent upon that legislative agenda, because that has massive impact on what we can do to maintain the program excellence that we currently have.
Yeah, that's a great point, Dr. Nestor Baker. And our legislature sometimes gets confused about when they're looking at legislation to bring forward and what that impact might have. They may have one intended consequence and have many unintended consequences with their legislation.
Nicely put.
Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
Appreciate it.
You ready? Mrs. Meyer,
Yes.
Mr. Bell,
Yes.
Dr. Nestor Baker,
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson.
Yes. 7.2, may I have a motion to approve the financial report and investments for April 2023?
So moved.
Second.
Ms. Marshall, do you want to talk to us about this?
Yes, thank you again. So this is the month ended for April for the current fiscal year. So the general fund had year-to-date receipts of $196.7 million, year-to-date expenditures of $157.2 million, and we ended with an unencumbered fund balance in the general fund of $193 million. Year-to-date receipts for all funds were $267.8 million, and year-to-date expenditures for all funds were $259.6 million. We ended with an unencumbered fund balance in April for all funds at $235.6 million.
Any questions or comments? Hearing none?
Mr. Bell?
Yes.
Dr. Nestor Baker?
Yes.
Mrs. Meyer?
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson?
Yes. 7.3, district credit card spending and rebate report?
Oh, that's just me. I'm sorry, that should have been a report, not under, sorry
It's
about that.
okay.
So this is just for me to report to the board our spending and rebate information for the district credit card for the current for the previous calendar year, 2022. So in total, we spent $556,784.02 on the credit card, and we received a rebate of 1.09% at $6,081.28.
Any questions or comments? Okay. 7.4, may I have a motion to amend fiscal year 2023 annual appropriations?
So moved.
Second. Second.
Me again. So this is amending our 2023 annual appropriations, so we are making adjustments for the forecast that you just saw. And then we also have some changes with grants and then changes in budgets requested. We do have a large increase in our medical claims that have been coming through, so we have a large increase in those appropriations. And some of that is offset by our stop-loss reimbursement that we get from our stop-loss carrier.
Any questions or comments?
I'm just curious, what are the grants that we received?
The new grant was a state grant. I don't recall what that was for specifically. I can follow up with you on that.
It's great, we got it.
Okay. Mrs. Meyer? Dr. Nestor Baker?
Yes.
Mr. Bell?
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson?
Yes. Is it okay if we do the personnel consent agenda as one? We'd like to welcome Mark Cooper and the personnel consent agenda, 8.1 through 8.14. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Welcome.
Good evening, President Davidson, Vice President Meyer, members of the board, Ms. Marshall, Mr. Kirschheiser.
Can you turn the mic on?
All right, we'll try that here. Perfect. The items in this evening's personnel consent agenda are quite lengthy, but do include regular action with regard to resignations, retirements, leaves of absence, one-time pays, contract status changes, and employment. It is May, and we are excited to be finishing off the year, but we also are already preparing fully into next year, so it is a busy time of year. I would like to call out a few specific items within this consent agenda. First, we have 4 retirements on the agenda this evening. We are appreciative for John Holmes' 13 years of service as a bus driver, Kim Mahavlik's 31 years of service as a secretary, Sharon Mason's 30 years of service as a bus driver, and Lauren Matiados' 23 years of service as a secretary. Some quick math adds those years to almost a century, 97 years worth of service to our district. And we just want to say thank you to all of them and best wishes on their years of retirement ahead. Also, I want to recognize and very proud to present to you this evening two administrators for your approval. They're here in attendance for you this evening. So first recognizing Michelle Martin. Michelle is right back here in the audience, and Michelle has been identified as one for your approval this evening for the next principal of Walnut Springs Middle School. She comes to us from Columbus City Schools, where she currently serves as principal of Columbus Scioto, which is a 612 school. She has 4 years of building level leadership experience, having previously served as that school's assistant principal and also as assistant principal at Columbus's A.G. Bell K-5 school. For 4 years, Michelle served Columbus City Schools as a special education coordinator and spent 10 years as an intervention specialist at Old Orchard Elementary. So she has quite a bit of experience this evening. Michelle holds an Associate of Arts degree from Cuyahoga Community College, a Bachelor of Arts in Business, and a Master of Business Administration from ODU. She holds a Master's of Education from the University of Dayton and is currently a doctoral candidate in educational leadership at Youngstown State University. She completed a principal licensure program at the OSU University and is in the process of completing her superintendent licensure program as well as computer technology endorsement. So she has a busy schedule, it seems, but we are excited to present her this evening to you for your approval. Also, I want to recognize Valerie Jasinski, and Valerie's back here as well. Valerie is up for your approval this evening as our new coordinator of gifted services. Valerie comes to us from the Educational Service Center of Central Ohio, where she has been serving as a gifted education consultant since 2020. Prior to joining the ESCCO, she was the gifted education coordinator for Buckeye Local Schools, as well as a gifted resource teacher for Pasco County Schools in Florida. She's worked as an adjunct professor for Mount St. Joseph University in Cincinnati, the University of California, Irvine, and Ashland University Columbus Center. She holds a Bachelor of Science degree from the University of Dayton, her Master of Arts in Gifted Education from the University of South Florida, and is completing the Principal Preparation Certificate through the American College of Education. So very excited to be able to bring her this evening to you as well for your approval. Lastly, we have a pretty long list of summer work that is to be completed, including curriculum and professional development planning, summer school, and staff training. I want to thank all of our staff members for the work they will accomplish over the summer in preparing for another great year ahead for our students. I certainly don't want to skip past these next couple of months because we know how important they are to everyone. I'm sure our students and many of our staff will take advantage of this time to rejuvenate and to be ready for the first day of school in August. It'll be here before we know it. So at this time, I'm happy to take any questions.
I don't have any questions. I just want to say welcome. Thank you for being here.
Welcome.
Delighted that you are both here. It's remarkable. I love your resumes, love everything I've heard about you, and I'm so excited to have you join the district. At the same time, I'm really sad about those individuals who are retiring. They represent some pretty remarkable classified staff, and I'm very thankful for the work that they have done.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Dr. Nestor Baker?
Yes.
Mr. Bell?
Yes.
Mrs. Meyer?
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson?
Yes. Moving on to old business, would it be okay if we took this as one? 9.1 and 9.2, may I have a motion for our final readings?
So moved.
Second.
Any comments or suggestions here? Hearing none?
Mrs. Meyer?
Yes.
Mr. Bell?
Yes.
Dr. Nestor Baker?
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson?
Yes. That brings us to new business, so we're going to welcome Dr. Knapp to the podium. 10.1, first reading secondary science course, revision and material selection. And Jen, I'm going to ask you, since there's several of these, if you would start with the number as you go along to the next one. If
Oh,
you
okay.
have
Or
4.
do you want me to pause
Oh.
after each one to see if there's questions, or you want me to just?
Yes,
Okay.
please.
I can do that. Okay. Good evening, President Davidson, members of the board, and fellow administrators. We've been very busy in the secondary curriculum department, as the first agenda item has 9 courses. I tried to group these the best way I can. So we will start with science and IB Courses, IB Biology, both standard and higher level, IB Chemistry, standard level, and IB Physics, higher level, are all taught over a 2-year period, and the adoption of these updated courses will prepare students for examinations that will first be administered in May of 2025. If you can believe that. My daughter will graduate in May of 2025. When I wrote this, I'm like, oh my gosh. So teachers will attend official IB professional development workshops in the fall. You know, IB is something that we didn't bring to the board consistently in the past. We're really trying to make an effort to do that, to follow board policy, and IB is just a little unusual as they are 2-year courses, so we need to be a little bit more ahead of the game. There are huge subject briefs, but what we have supplied to you are the course briefs, which are just a few pages long. So you have those as well. The next group of science courses are Project Lead the Way courses, Principles of Biomedical Science, and Introduction to Engineering and Design. Project Lead the Way revised these curriculums in 2022, and Westerville teachers have followed suit. The new courses of study reflect the new units and organization, additional features and activities embedded in the Project Lead the Way learning platform, and updates to lab and design activities. Both curricula continue to follow an activity, problem, and project-based approach. Next, Project Lead the Way, is our computer science for innovators and makers. That served as the core curriculum for this 8th grade elective. Still using that as our base, we have incorporated lessons from Code HS and Code.org and restructured the content around 4 themes: computing systems, coding, cybersecurity, and careers. For simplicity, and because it's not solely a Project Lead the Way course, we are requesting that the course title be shortened to Computer Science. CSIM, or Computer Science for Innovators and Makers, is a mouthful. And lastly, for science, ecology and zoology. Courses of study and materials for these 2 courses have not been updated in a very long time, so the teachers were extremely excited to do this work. Revisions to ecology included aligning the course of study with the current ODE environmental science course and science and engineering practices. Updates include driving questions, clearer learning targets, and a reorganization of topics. And then standards and a model curriculum does not exist by the state for zoology. And revisions include defining 2 primary components of the course, Ohio Wildlife and Taxonomic Survey, and establishing driving questions, learning targets, and vocabulary. And if I could take another second on science and thank Lindsay Manzo, Laura Ferguson, Jeff Odom, Autumn McCormick, Brooke Cochran, Shelley Coral, Caitlin Cantrell, Bree Clegg, Eric Eckes, Dennis Lackey, Elizabeth King, Kristen McGannick, I'm going to say that wrong, and Aslan Valentine, who have all been part of this work. So they are all current teachers of these courses that our curriculum specialist meets with and works on these revisions. So very, very much a part of this work. So questions about 9 science courses? Not so much. Moving on.
Yep, that would be good.
Okay. All right. Adapted ELA. So Life Skills Adapted English Language Arts addresses the student need for a modified curriculum accessing the extended standards 9 through 12. This is a course that is designed to specifically serve and support students who are alternatively assessed and require significant modifications to instruction. So that's mainly the course, and then there's 2 products that the teachers are requesting be board approved. The first is Unique Learning System. It's been a curriculum resource primarily for students with disability that are alternatively assessed and need those extended learning standards. This supports and facilitates direct instruction using scaffolded modifications to content. Vizzle is another product from Rethink Ed, and this standards-based resource aligns with the extended standards for students, accessing those standards to engage in meaningful learning activities. And in addition to subject matter curriculum, it also offers resources to support life skills and adaptive learning, as well as social emotional problem solving and regulation. This is something that the Special Education Department and Curriculum and Instruction have been talking about for a long time, really getting these courses of study updated and materials aligned. So Lindy Whitson, Erin Fott, Stacy Schneider, Amy Brill, and Anna Marie Shoemaker were part of developing this course. We have grand plans to have, at the beginning of the year, all 4 core content areas will get all these courses done. We kind of revisited that and decided to start with ELA, so you will be seeing more and more every year over time. Moving on to math. Okay. Algebra 1, 8th grade algebra, geometry, and honors geometry. These courses were modestly revised to be updated to ODE's revisions. And also we are requesting a supplemental resource, Delta Math. This tool supports student learning based on standards by providing teachers with standard-aligned questions to use as assessment tools to help measure student learning. So we're super excited as we work on standards-based learning that teachers can look at a standard, pull a question, and when used online, students can watch videos and get tips to help support and clarify their learning. I have to admit, Dave Schultz really was a part of this, and at Curriculum Council was so excited. And he's like, this is like life-changing. And then a parent who also happens to be a former math teacher and the principal at North said he, kind of doesn't remember everything about Algebra 2. And when his daughter comes home and they can watch a video, he said it has been so instrumental in helping. And I think that as we've talked with our curriculum liaison, that was something that has been missing, is the ability to support our students at home and the level that we would like to. So we do think that this is a great tool for us at 9-12. And you can print them off, but then you just don't get to access the video. So it is accessible if you don't have a computer. And then the next one is ELA. So we are up to 10.04. Our ELA teachers have been revising their courses of study and will continue to do so next year, and they're requesting the purchase of a supplemental resource. It's Common Lit 360. This will provide writing support and data about student progress and support the need for student choice from a standards-aligned vetted bank of informational and literary texts. I love it. You go to the side, you click on the standard that you want, and different articles are populated, and ELA teachers have been using the free version for quite some time, but we will be able to implement this product with even better fidelity as our teachers will be provided professional learning to best use this resource to support student learning. So this is something that is 612. We have iReady in 6.8, and that supports the reading standards. We do not currently have a broad scope product to support writing. So this is our first step in that. Now questions.
I have a question. So this would be in conjunction with iReady.
Say that again.
This Common Lit would be used in conjunction with iReady.
It would be used in conjunction, yes.
Okay.
Not instead of. It's not a has 2 different goals. And Dr. Williams did join us from ELA. And really, this wasn't a committee necessarily that decided this. It was the department facilitators have really been talking about supporting writing. And so this came from their collective work. And there's one department facilitator for ELA at every building.
Can I ask it? So can you just give an example of how it could support writing for our students?
I could have Dr. Williams come up and speak specifically. We have to get you recorded.
You have to be on the mic.
You have to be on the mic.
Yeah, so right now, because as Dr. Knapp said, that the teachers are working, they have been working with skills-based and standards-based learning for quite some time, but we're moving even more towards that. So what happens is one of our Achilles heels that we're working on for ELA is a lot of teachers have a favorite story that they like to teach or a favorite novel. We all have favorite novels we like to read. And so it's been a little bit of a shift to kind of blend those wonderful stories and also have the standards met. So a lot of the writing standards, our ELA teachers were kind of saying, well, we want to provide a lot of student choice, but we also want to make sure our writing standards are supported. And with the level of differentiation that's been needed, especially going through COVID and continuing to kind of shore that up, the teachers were struggling to provide the level that was needed for differentiation. So Common Lit the teacher can click on the standard, and then the student can choose the story. So we can have, the students can jump in and have lots of choice still. And it takes some of the pressure off of the teachers because writing is hard. It takes a long time. There's a lot of time spent for providing feedback. One of the things that we really liked and the facilitators really liked about Common Lit is that there's writing, high-level writing instruction prompts built into the program that can be matched with the different stories that the students pick. So the teachers don't have to resource them for every group that needs differentiation.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Anybody else? Great, thank you so much. Much appreciated. Up next, 10.5, first reading approved fiscal year 24 calendar changes. Mr. Dorn, welcome.
Good evening, President Davidson, Vice President Meyer, members of the board, Mr. Hershiser, and Ms. Marshall. The school year calendars for the 2023-24 and the 2024-25 school years have been established and approved by the Board of Education. Tonight, we present changes to the calendars that would eliminate the 4 early release dates and replace them with an additional professional development day. For several years, the WEA Advisory Committee have held discussions on the structure of professional development opportunities. The 4 early release dates, release time for professional development impact WEA members similarly to a single professional development day in total time. However, a single day presents more opportunity for continuity in the presentation of professional development options with lesser potential for operational impacts. For students and families, a single professional development day will impact students for 2 hours and 30 minutes longer than the 4 iterations of the early release, but only impacts 1 day versus 4. The calendars presented tonight show the location of the additional professional development day on each of the school year calendars. For the 2023-2024 calendar, the additional date is tentatively set for January 12th, 2024. For the 24-25 calendar, the tentative date selected is August 9th, 2024, which will push the start of the school year back 1 day to August 14th for students. It's currently set at August 13th. Given the 30-day review window for establishing a school year calendar, the second reading of the calendar is scheduled for June 26th. During this time, the district will continue to study the impact of making these changes with all employee groups. The WEA Advisory Committee has already supported these changes.
Any questions or comments? Okay. Hearing none, thank you. Okay. 10.7, first reading policy 7540.2, web accessibility content apps and services. And I'd like to welcome Greg Friedbrands.
Good evening, President Davidson, Vice President Meyer, members of the board, Mr. Hershiser, Ms. Marshall. I'm here this evening as your warm-up act to tonight's policy headliner, Mr. Tim Stifler. So it's my job to get you revved up and ready for a fun night of technology policy updates. So let's dive into 7540.02. It's what you've all been waiting for.
Yeah, that's great.
Web accessibility content apps and services. The updates to this policy strengthens the language that restricts the publishing of school-related information on non-district platforms. Also, the inclusion of student-created work on school or district-created web pages or sites, user interaction with online content, and recommended technical standards that allow us to comply with federal website accessibility requirements. The updates to this policy, they're primarily housekeeping. This incorporates new terms and standards, and also the policy will continue to require that the staff use only board-approved platforms to share student progress reports, grades, class assignments or any other class-related materials. It continues to require staff to obtain student, if they're over 18, or parental permission for minors, permission to display student-created works or use their full name online, and it continues to require the district to meet the same web content accessibility guidelines that the federal government meets when publishing any public-facing websites. 3 administrative procedural matters were moved from this policy document to the associated administrative guidelines. And so with that, it would be our recommendation in this first reading that you would approve this during the second reading.
Any questions or comments? Hearing none. Well done. Up next, 10.8, our headliner, Tim Stifler, Policy 7540 Technology. And Tim, if you would like to start with the first policy, and I know some of them are similar just for different groups.
Sure.
You can just move through them.
All right. Good evening, President Davidson, Vice President Meyer, members of the board, Mr. Hershiser, Mrs. Marshall. This evening, there's a couple agenda items in front of you here that are revisions to several existing policies recommended for adoption of the board. Some of these policies are quite dated, so we've taken some time to be very vigilant in our work to differentiate what needed to be in the policies and what needed to be in the guidelines for each policy. So we'll start with the first policy. Policy 7540 is a technology policy. Really the only revisions within that policy were definition updates for some of the roles that were involved. For policy 7540-01, technology privacy, the big call out for that specific policy is the inclusion of multi-factor authentication as one of the security tools the district can now take advantage of to secure our environments. There's some definition updates within that policy and some clarification on roles involving software. Policies 7540-03 and 7540-04 are updates to the acceptable use and safety policies for both students and staff. Both of those include the addition of multi-factor authentication, once again, and some clarification around AI and NLP tools, so artificial intelligence and natural language processing tools. Policies 8305 and 8315 are essentially definition and grammatical updates. Like I said, a lot of the heavy lifting is done within the administrative guidelines for each of the policies. So I'm happy to take any questions.
Any questions or comments?
Glad to see this, and thank you for all the work you've been doing behind the scenes with all of this, helping us to shore up our processes and
I would
our
say
vulnerabilities.
if anyone deserves a thank you, it is Jennifer Ferris for typing all these up. So,
Great.
thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Recommended action, standing business, 11.1, donations. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
We are so grateful for each and every donation.
Mr. Bell?
Yes.
Mrs. Meyer?
Yes.
Dr. Nestor Baker?
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson?
Yes. 11.2, out-of-state and overnight field trips. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
And I'd like to welcome Ann Baldwin. Welcome, Ann.
Good evening, Ms. Davidson, members of the board, Mr. Hershiser, and Ms. Marshall. I have 3 trips for you to consider for approval this evening, 2 of which are new and include our students traveling in June to the Dominican Republic, as well as Panama and Central America. The third request on here to go to Costa Rica is actually an update. Another teacher is actually taking over the trip, and they changed the date by 2 days. All of these tours being supported with EF, which is a company that we're familiar with and really does a great job in supporting our students. And I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
All right. Hearing none. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
Mr. Bell?
Yes.
Dr. Nestor Baker?
Yes.
Mrs. Meyer,
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson.
Yes. 11.3, may I have a motion to approve the application for one-time records disposal?
So moved.
Second.
And Ms. Marshall, you want to talk to us about this a little bit?
Yes, thank you, President Davidson, members of the board. So this is just our annual records destruction process. We ask for the board's approval for that. All of these items match our records retention schedule that the board has adopted.
Any questions or comments? Hearing none?
Mrs. Meyer,
Yes.
Dr. Nestor Baker,
Yes.
Mr. Bell,
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson.
Yes. 11.4, general service contract between Licking County Educational Service Center and Westerville City Board of Education, fiscal year 2024 for the school year 23-24. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
And I'd like to welcome Gertie Glass. Welcome.
I was so excited that I came here before.
Oh, good. We love seeing your face.
Good evening, President Davidson, members of the board, Mr. Hershiser, and Ms. Marshall. I would like to propose a contract renewal between Westerville City Schools and Lincoln County Educational Service Center in the event that an IEP team determines that a student least restrictive environment is an out-of-district placement. Are there any questions?
Hearing none.
Thank
Thank you so much.
Uh-huh.
Mr. Bell,
Yes.
Mrs. Meyer,
Yes.
Dr. Nestor Baker,
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson.
Yes. 11.5, may I have a motion to approve the settlement agreements with Crown Castle and T-Mobile?
So moved.
Second.
Welcome, Mr. Dorn.
Good evening again. The resolution in front of you pertains to two cell towers operated by Crown Castle, one at North High School and one at South High School. Per the agreements, these towers should be metered separately, but are not. Approving this resolution allows for the electrical supply issues to be remedied and for the district to receive just over $50,000 in settlement funds for the previous electrical supply. It is recommended that the board approve this resolution.
Any questions or comments? Hearing none.
Dr. Nestor Baker,
Yes.
Mr. Bell,
Yes.
Mrs. Meyer,
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson.
Yes. 11.6, may I have a motion to approve the change of scope for Emerson Elementary project?
So moved.
Second.
On May 8th, the board approved Black Bronco as the general contractor for the Emerson Interior Renovations Project. Black Bronco has a bond capacity issue and was unable to be bonded for the full amount of the project. They are able to be bonded for a reduced scope. The overall bid for the project was $1,147,500, or $568,000 under the next lowest bidder. In light of the difference in bid pricing, district administration, in consultation with the architect for the project, recommend that the board reject all bids in accordance with Section 3.5 of the instructions to bidders for the Emerson project. Furthermore, the district administration, in consultation with the project architect, recommend a reduced scope of work for the project be authorized by the board with an estimated cost of construction not to exceed the amount of $749,999, or the bid capacity for Black Bronco. It is recommended that the board approve the resolution as presented so that we can get some scope of the work done this summer, as the remaining scope will then have to be rebid for next summer.
And you just addressed what I was going to ask, which is the reduction in scope is, I guess, in some ways more of a postponement of scope.
Yes, it's a reduction for Black Bronco
Yes.
unless they are the next successful bidder.
Right. Yeah, I just don't want people to think that we are in some way shortchanging Emerson.
No, absolutely not.
Any other questions or comments? Hearing none.
Mrs. Meyer,
Yes.
Mr. Bell,
Yes.
Dr. Nestor Baker,
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson.
Yes. 11.7, may I have a motion to approve student candidates for the 2023 graduation from Westerville Central, North, and South High Schools,
So moved.
pending completion of local and state
Oh.
requirements?
Second.
Mark, do you want to talk to us about this a little bit?
Sure. And as two of you know, with your youngest graduating this year, Saturday graduation at 10, 2, and 6, down at Ohio State Fairgrounds. We are happy to present to the board 1,182 graduates this evening.
Any other questions or comments?
Ready? Mr. Bell?
Yes.
Mrs. Meyer?
Yes.
Dr. Mr. Baker? I'm sorry.
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson?
Yes. Moving along to public comments, we do not have any this evening, which takes us to board comments. And who would like to go first?
Sure, I will. We want to welcome the new additions to the Westerville City School staff. It's such a pleasure to have you as part of the family, so we hope that you feel welcomed and look forward to working together. We want to congratulate our retirees and wish them well in the next chapter of their lives. Want to congratulate the over 1,000 graduates that we have just approved to receive their diplomas on Saturday. Just a quick reminder to the graduates and to all of the families that will be attending, use the 11th Avenue exit as you come to the graduation ceremony on Saturday. Just in closing, one more thing. I want to remind everyone that right now the survey is available for community members, staff members, different members of the community to participate in our superintendent search. And so we certainly want to encourage everyone to take advantage of participating in this process. We want this to be an inclusive process that will benefit all of us. Thank you.
I will echo what Vaughn said and just note that some of us will be down at Fourth Friday, this coming Friday, to get people to fill out the superintendent search survey. So come on down and see us. I do have a small update on House Bill 33, our state biennium budget. I want to thank Ms. Marshall because on May 9th, she testified on behalf of the school district before the Senate Education Committee on the state's budget. And she requested that the General Assembly not expand private school vouchers, stating that private schools are not subject to the same compliance requirements, and they have no oversight in how taxpayer dollars are spent. And I think that's really important. And she goes on to state, for this reason alone, they should not be funded with taxpayer money, and ask the General Assembly to continue the Fair School Funding Plan with updated inputs for fiscal year 2022. Stating school funding has never been consistent in her time with the phase-in of the Fair School Funding Plan. Westerville City School District continues to be underfunded. And when looking at all of the accountability measures in place for public schools, the proposal to continue expanding school vouchers while knowingly underfunding public schools throughout Ohio is not in the best interest of our state or our students. Instead of diverting public funds to private schools, she goes on to say that we would love to see the legislature fully fund its public schools for a change. I believe the majority of Ohio voters would appreciate this too, because such a commitment from our state's elected officials would reduce the frequency and amount of local operating levies that districts must request from their respective communities. So again, thank you for taking the time to go down and testify on behalf of the Westerville City School District and educating our legislators about how pending legislation would impact our district and students and families we serve. The Senate Finance Committee will be holding hearings on this bill over the next 2 weeks, with May 31st at 9 a.m. focusing on education.
Awesome. I'm not going to repeat, but I echo all the comments up here, and I would just like to add to our staff and our students to have a wonderful summer, and you deserve this time off, and please rest, and we can't wait to see you next year.
I don't have much to say, except my hand is warmed up. I am ready to shake the hands of all 1,182, I think you said, graduates this year. It is like Christmas Day to me, so I am thoroughly excited about Saturday.
Okay. 14.1, the board will meet in regular session on Monday, June 12th, here at the Early Learning Center. And with that, may I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Mr. Bell?
Yes.
Dr. Nestor Baker?
Yes.
Mrs. Meyer?
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson?
Yes. And with that, we're adjourned.